right, we're gonna get started in just a few minutes. All right, I think we're just gonna get started now. So, this is meeting number 2 in the course, Introduction to Middle School Biology. And today our essential question is, what is a cell? So we'll be covering cell theory, the history of cell theory, prokaryotic versus eukaryotic cells, and animal versus plant cells. So we're gonna be starting off with you can type in the chat if like you can't see my screen, but yeah. So first we're gonna be starting with cell theory. So cell theory is just a bunch of like rules about like living things having cells. So the first one is all organisms must be made of cells. As I covered in the last class, having cells is like a identification factor for living things. So yeah, all organisms are made of cells, including bacteria, even humans, animals, any living thing. All existing cells are produced by other living cells. Um, yeah, so like cells can't come from things that are not alive. So like cells only come from cells. And there was an addition made to this. Like hundreds of years ago, which says that all animal cells can only come from all animal cells, and all plant cells can only be coming from other plant cells. And I'll be diving deeper into that in the next few slides. And the last rule we have of cell theory is that the cell is the most basic unit of life. So here in this picture, you can see like different types of cells, muscle cells, nerve cells, neurons, blood cells. It's like every function in your body has a specialized cell for that function. Okay, now we're going to start talking about the history of cell theory. So how and who came up with these rules. So first we're going to be talking about Anthony van Leeuwenhoek. So he was a Dutch shopkeeper. He was a draper in the 1600s who created like a lens to view microbes, and at the time he called them animalcules. And he didn't create the first microscope ever, but he's credited with improving the official microscope. So he created like a lens which helped him view single-celled organisms, including bacteria and protozoa, which he called animalcules. And yeah, he discovered bacteria and protozoa in the 1670s. Um, Next is Robert Hooke. So one day he was like viewing cork tissue, which is like technically like dead plant tissue, through a lens, and he observed these like cell structures, and he was the first person who said like yes, these structures inside these like the sample of cork is actually called a cell, and he published it in the 1665 Micrographia. Um, and then later on, he um, he talked more about like cell structures and everything, but he's the one who's credited with the term cell. And nowadays we have like many advances in microscope constructions, and scientists discovered more organelles, which are like tiny, like you can say like organs in our body is similar to organelles in cells. And we'll be learning more about that next class. Next is Schleiden and Schwann, and they were studying tissues, and they were the ones who proposed like the unified cell theory, so the three laws that I covered earlier. And Rudolf Virchow, which is the last picture here, he was the one who was credited with like the addition I was talking about. So all plant cells can only come from plant cells, and animal cells can only come from other animal cells. So yeah, he also made important contributions to this proposed theory by Schleiden and Schwann. Okay, next we'll be covering prokaryotic versus eukaryotic cells. And this class might be a little short, but it is pretty content heavy, so I wanted to keep it short. Okay, prokaryotic cells. So this picture shows like bacteria here. Most types of bacteria are prokaryotic cells, meaning they have it's technically a cell, but it doesn't have like structured organelles inside it. So most single-celled organisms like bacteria, they have prokaryotic cells, like one prokaryotic cell, making them like one bacterium. And organisms with prokaryotic cells were the first type of organisms to evolve and are still very common in today's times. Like there's way more bacteria than humans on the earth, and yeah, so they're like little tiny single-celled organisms. Next are eukaryotic cells. So these are the cells that are usually found in humans, animals, plants. So they have a membrane-bound nucleus, which is like the center of the cell, the control house of like every cell, controlling all functions going around the cell. Um, and these are the types of cells that are found in multicellular organisms, like many cells, many of these individual eukaryotic cells in every single organism. So there's like millions of cells in our own body, animals, plants. So yeah. And these are the kinds of cells that evolved from prokaryotic cells and formed these like complex animals. Okay. So this is like more about the differences between these types of cells. So prokaryotic cells are mostly found in bacteria, protozoa, microbes, and evolved earlier on. And then eukaryotic cells came later on, um, and helped form more complex animals. Um, so they have membrane-bound organelles, which is organelles are basically like these tiny little structures in every single cell that have a specific job in maintaining the cell's function. And prokaryotic cells, they can be only part of unicellular organisms, which is basically like they only have one cell and they're considered an organism, like bacteria again. And eukaryotic, they're part of both unicellular and multicellular organisms, like complex animals, humans, plants, that type of stuff. Prokaryotic cells, they have no nucleus, so there is no control center of the cell, unlike a eukaryotic cell, which the nucleus is present and controls the entirety of the cell's function. So like all our cells have a nucleus and it controls everything. It stores our DNA, which is basically like the genetic material, which defines traits for us. And yeah, prokaryotic cells do not have a nucleus. And so you can imagine prokaryotic cells as kind of like a little sack of like messed up everything. Even though it's kind of structured, it's kind of like a whole blob of just random stuff. Prokaryotic cells are usually smaller, so found in single-celled organisms, and eukaryotic cells are way bigger, um, because they usually fit in more organelles. There's a nucleus, there's more stuff to fit into one cell, so they're way bigger. Um, Prokaryotic cells, one chromosome is present. So chromosomes are this like compact version of your DNA. So all your DNA is like compact into like one kind of like X thing. Like I'll show you right here. So chromosomes kind of look like this like little X I'm drawing on the side. So all your DNA is this is one chromosome, and all your DNA, like prokaryotic cell DNA, would be found like in one little chromosome. But humans and like multicellular organisms who have eukaryotic cells, they have like 23 pairs of chromosomes. So this is one pair, this is a second pair, and then third pair. So we have 23 pairs of this chromosomes to fit all of our DNA, all of our genetic material. So eukaryotic cells have many chromosomes present, but prokaryotic cells only have one. And all these chromosomes are found in the nucleus of the cell, which is like the center of the cell. So imagine a cell like this big, and there's a nucleus like right in the middle, like that. And sorry, and then this has like all of these chromosomes over here. Um, Prokaryotic cells, they don't have lysosomes or peroxisomes. And I think I have um, a model of this somewhere. Lysosomes and peroxisomes, they're like detox structures for your cell. And let me see if I have this here. Yeah. So this would be considered lysosome at the bottom, this white circle. Um, this would be considered a lysosome. So these are like cleaning structures for your cell. So they're basically like trash bags. So they take whatever the cell doesn't need anymore. And I'm gonna erase this on the side. So they take whatever the cell doesn't need anymore and they recycle it into like new material for the cell. And peroxisomes are kind of the same thing. Um, okay, let's go back. And then, yeah, eukaryotic cells do have these lysosomes and peroxisomes, like the trash bags of the cell. Okay. Prokaryotic cells, they have a cell wall, which is like the surrounding like boundary, for the cell, and it's like chemically complex. And eukaryotic cells will be covering types of eukaryotic cells, which include animal and plant cells later. But they have all eukaryotic cells have a cell wall, and plant cells have an extra cell membrane to protect them. But they're chemically simpler. Um, the permeability of the nuclear membrane is not present for prokaryotic cells, and eukaryotic cells, it is selective, so what can go in and out of the cell. Prokaryotic cells, most of their organelles are missing. Like they don't have a nucleus, as I said, they don't have other organelles we'll be talking about. Like organelles might include mitochondria, lysosomes are an example of organelles, and examples of uh, examples of organisms that have prokaryotic cells, bacteria and archaea. Eukaryotic cells, some examples are plants, protists, fungi, animals, humans. Um, and the last thing I want to cover is many organelles bound in the cytoplasm. The cytoplasm is kind of like this jelly like fluid in the cell. So this whole like purple material that you see is the cytoplasm. There's like this jelly that all these little organelles, so this would be an organelle, nucleus is an organelle. So all these little colorful dots you see are like organelles. And like just as you can imagine organs in the body doing their specific functions, organelles have specific functions within one individual cell, and they do that. So all these little things are organelles. Prokaryotic cells, as you can see, it's kind of like a whole jumble of everything. Like there is no structure. Like this, everything here in this animal cell, sorry, animal cell looks very structured. And here, the prokaryotic cell structure, there's nothing really organized here. You can see a few ribosomes. They're like the makers of your protein. So they make whatever the DNA tells them to make, and that decides your traits. So this whole thing is a jumble of just random organelles. Um, yeah, and then they still do have the cytoplasm, like the jelly-like fluid. They have a flagellum, which is for movement of the cell moving through various structures because many of these prokaryotic cells they're found in organisms that only have one of this cell. So they gotta like move around with their flagellum, and there's more hair-like structures around the cell, which is solely for movement purposes. Okay. Next we're gonna be going on to animal and plant cells. Um, okay. So animal and plant cells, they are types of eukaryotic cells. So they have multiple organelles, they have a nucleus, but they're split into two. So animal is on one side, like human cells, and then plant cells. Um, yeah, as I said, types of eukaryotic cells. Plant cells, they have things called chloroplasts. You might have heard of chlorophyll, which is like a pigment that gives um like the green color for a leaf. So chlorophyll is contained within chloroplasts, and these chloroplasts are what actually do photosynthesis on a leaf. So like making energy for the plant. So as you might have learned in like kindergarten or elementary, like sun, water, carbon dioxide, they all go into the leaf and like produce oxygen and food for the plant, which is in the form of glucose. So like chloroplasts are what does this function. Plant cells have a cell wall and a cell membrane. So the cell membrane is most cell membrane gives like plant cell more protection and more support. And a fun fact that I learned like a couple of days ago, the only reason the plant cells have this extra layer of protection is because plant cells don't have bones like us for the support that animals need. So animals have bones and a whole skeletal system just for support, and plants don't really have that. So they need the extra protection in each individual cell. And this cell membrane gives plant cells a squarish like shape which you might see like as I was just talking about Robert Hooke like discovering like cork cells, which is like dead plant cells having this like box-like structure. As I can show you in the next picture right here, it has like a very boxy structure. Um, Animal cells, they have mitochondria, which is a type of organelle, because they don't really need to make their own food. So mitochondria, like as long as like you okay, I'm gonna be talking about animals like humans. So when humans like eat food, there's like mitochondria in every individual cell. Because when we take in food, we take in glucose, and our body can't really use glucose directly as energy for all sorts of purposes, like respiration, digestion, circulatory system, and all that. So we have mitochondria in every single cell, and that mitochondria changes that glucose into ATP, which is the readily form of energy that our body can use. So I'm going to point that to you right here. So these yellow structures you see around the cell are mitochondria, and this is like the powerhouse of the cell. This makes all the energy for our cells, our body, everything. Okay. Animal cells, like all other non-plant eukaryotic cells, only have a cell wall because they don't really need that extra support because animals have bones and an entire skeletal system for just for that. Animal cells have a small vacuole, unlike plant cells that have a big vacuole. So a vacuole is kind of like an air pocket for the cell. Um, it's like right here. So this one would be a plant vacuole, the light green sac you see. That's the plant vacuole. And this is an animal vacuole. So you can see the size difference there. Yeah. And vacuoles like just know it differs in size in different types of eukaryotic cells. Um, Next we have Yeah, a vacuole is for storage and like maintaining the shape of the cell, and plants really need that because they have to maintain that shape for protection on it and support. Um, Plant cells contain plastids, and plastids are basically for photosynthesis and storage for metabolites. And if I can point that to you here, I don't know if this drawing has a plastid in it, but yeah, I don't think um these diagrams have plastids in it, but just know they're for photosynthesis and storage of metabolites. Um, Animal cells have a complex and prominent Golgi apparatus, which is a apparatus is one more organelle which is responsible for the packaging of proteins. So animal cells would have it, hold on. Animal cells would have it right here, like surrounding the nucleus. You can see the Golgi apparatus with like little red dots, which are the ribosomes. So think of ribosomes as like the chefs. So they're given a recipe by our DNA to make a protein, and the ribosomes basically like cook up the protein for the cell. And proteins are basically what determine your traits and yeah, traits and how you look, physical features, anything ranging from that. So the Golgi apparatus is these like blue lines you see surrounding the nucleus. So they are responsible for packaging the proteins that these ribosomes make. So yeah, and hold on. Um, yeah, they have a complex and prominent Golgi apparatus because animal cells make more proteins to sustain their cell functions. And as I talked about, the cytoplasm is like this like watery jelly-like fluid filling almost the entirety of our cells. So as you can see on the animal cells, it's like this like orange background. So all of that is cytoplasm. And then plant cells don't have much of that because their structure being so compact and like box-like. Yeah. Animal cells do not contain plastids as we don't really need to do photosynthesis because we eat food. So we don't really have to make our own food. Okay. Now I have this small little Kahoot if you want. I think we'll just go through the Kahoot. Um, you can type in the chat if you want to do the Kahoot, or I can like post this PowerPoint on the Google Classroom. Um, or you can like unmute and tell me. All right, we'll just see the Kahoot. Um, okay, I'll just post this link on our Google Classroom. But thank you for coming to meeting two. And next class we will be going over cell organelles and their functions. Yeah, thank you so much.